Yo, we back with another reaction video. Look what we got here. How every infamous dictator died. Now, if you're down with the reaction videos, definitely make sure to smash that like button. Hit that follow. Comment down below which famous person or famous dictator were you shocked or not shocked about dying. Let's get into it.
Adolf Hitler. When Soviet tanks rumbled through the streets of Berlin in late April 1945, Adolf Hitler knew his empire had crumbled. The man who once commanded millions was now trapped underground like a rat. Hitler spent his final days in a concrete bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery, surrounded by a shrinking circle of loyalists who watched their Führer deteriorate before their eyes. On April 29th, he married his longtime companion Eva Braun in a bizarre midnight ceremony. The next day, April 30th, 1945, Hitler said his final goodbyes. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, he and Eva retreated to their private quarters. What happened next was confirmed by those who found them. Hitler had bitten into a cyanide capsule and shot himself in the head simultaneously. Eva died beside him, having only consumed the poison. Their bodies were carried up the bunker stairs, doused with gasoline in the Reich Chancellery garden.
I did not know that. I care not to learn about Hitler, but wow. So he got married and then took some pills and did that to himself. Wow. And his new wife also
and set ablaze while Soviet artillery boomed in the distance. The man who'd sent millions to their deaths in camps and battlefields chose to escape judgment by his own hand, leaving nothing but charred remains and a legacy of horror. He was 56 years old. News of Hitler's death spread across the world, marking the end of the European theater of World War II, and spawning decades of conspiracy theories about whether he really died or somehow escaped. Benito Mussolini. Benito Mussolini spent his final hours running. The Italian dictator who'd once strutted on balconies preaching about a new Roman Empire was now...
You imagine that? You're ruling. You're going on the balcony. And now you're running from death.
Disguised in a German military coat, trying to flee to Switzerland. On April 27, 1945, communist partisans stopped a German convoy at a checkpoint near Lake Como. Among the soldiers, they found Il Duce himself, the great fascist leader, hiding like a common criminal. Mussolini and his mistress, Clara Petacci, were pulled from the convoy and held overnight. The next day, April 28, a partisan leader named Walter Odysseus arrived with orders to execute them. Accounts vary on the exact details, but what's certain is this. Mussolini and Petacci were taken to a villa gate in the small village of Giulino di Mezzegra and shot with a submachine gun. The partisans...
Wow, they took him to that area and with a machine gun? That's insane.
Loaded the bodies into a van and drove them to Milan, to a place called Piazzale Loreto. This wasn't random. Months earlier, Mussolini's regime had executed 15 partisans and left their bodies on display at that exact location. Now it was his turn. When the truck arrived at dawn on April 29, Mussolini, Petacci, and several other executed fascist officials were dumped on the ground. A crowd gathered quickly, and things got ugly fast. People kicked the corpses, spat on them, fired at them again. One woman reportedly fired 5 more times into Mussolini's body, once for each of her dead sons. Then came the finale. The bodies were hung upside down from the roof of a gas station. The crowd went wild.
Yo, they got hung on the roof of a gas station? That's crazy.
Jeering and celebrating beneath the corpses. News of Mussolini's brutal death flashed across the world, signaling the definitive collapse of fascist Italy and marking a symbolic turning point in the final unraveling of World War II. Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-il ruled North Korea for 17 years with an iron grip, maintaining one of the most isolated and oppressive regimes on Earth. He cultivated a personality cult, so extreme that state propaganda claimed he could control the weather and didn't need to use the bathroom. But in December 2011...
that he could control the weather and didn't need to go to the bathroom. That's some crazy stuff right there. How he's going to be able to control the weather.
The man who'd been portrayed as nearly superhuman died from something decidedly human, a heart attack. On December 17, 2011, Kim Jong-il was traveling by train through North Korea when he suffered a massive heart attack, reportedly brought on by physical and mental stress. He was
Ain't that
69 years
something?
old. North Korean state media didn't announce his death until 2 days later, on December 19th, claiming he died at 8:30 a.m. on his train while on a field guidance tour. The announcement described him
Imagine that.
passing during a great mental and physical.
Ain't that something? Just a simple thing as a heart attack took this guy out. That's karma for you, man.
Strain, while dedicating himself to the nation. Official reports said he'd been suffering from diabetes and heart disease for years, though the regime had hidden this from the public. When the news finally broke, North Korean television showed anchor Ri Chun-hee dressed in black, weeping as she announced the dear leader's passing. State media broadcast footage of citizens collapsing in theatrical grief, wailing in the streets and bowing before his
Man, they
portraits.
really
Whether the grief was
were
genuine
shocked.
or performed out of fear, the spectacle was surreal. Kim Jong-il's body was embalmed and placed on display in a glass coffin at the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun in Pyongyang, lying in state alongside his father Kim Il-sung. Unlike many dictators who met violent ends, Kim Jong-il died of natural causes, never
Just a
facing
natural
justice for the
cause, that's-
starvation, imprisonment, and execution
not.
of countless North Koreans. He passed power seamlessly to his son, Kim Jong-un, ensuring the dynasty continued. Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin ruled
course.
through terror for
Of course, you got to pass it on to your kids.
nearly 3 decades, but in the end, that same
Stalin,
terror
huh?
might have killed him. On the night of March 1st, 1953, Stalin hosted one of his infamous late-night dinners at his dacha near Moscow. He drank heavily with his inner circle of Soviet officials,
Of course.
the same men who lived in constant fear of purges and midnight arrests. Around 4 a.m., Stalin dismissed everyone and retired to his private quarters. Then something happened. Hours passed. Stalin always summoned his guards and staff by mid-morning, but March 2nd came and went with silence from his room. Here's where it gets darkest. His guards and household staff knew something was wrong, but they were absolutely terrified to enter without being called.
Yo, don't tell me they drank some joint and then they came into his room and that was it. Or whatever they gave him to drink was not good.
Stalin had cultivated such a climate of fear that his own people were too scared to check if he was alive. By the time someone finally worked up the courage to peek inside that evening, they found the 74-year-old dictator lying on the floor in a puddle of his own urine, partially paralyzed from a massive stroke. He'd been there for nearly 12 hours. Medical help was summoned,
Stroke.
but the delay had done its damage. Stalin lingered for days, unable to speak, his face contorted, slowly dying while doctors tried desperately to save him. Some historians believe his guards delayed on purpose. Others think his own officials might have poisoned him or withheld help intentionally.
That's what I was saying.
On March 5th, 1953, at 9:50 p.m., Stalin finally died. The announcement triggered mass public mourning across
So I'm
the Soviet
thinking
Union,
they must have
but privately,
poisoned him.
many breathed sighs of relief as his reign came to an end. Rafael Trujillo.
What's that guy?
Rafael Trujillo
Wait, what was that guy sitting on the toilet reading the newspaper? That was funny. I like these little cartoonish stick figure
ruled
people.
the Dominican Republic like his personal kingdom for 31 brutal years,
Dominican Republic.
ordering assassinations, tortures, and disappearances with casual cruelty. But on the night of May 30th, 1961, the hunter became the hunted. Trujillo was being driven on a highway outside Santo Domingo when several cars suddenly blocked his route. A group of Dominican conspirators, many of them military officers who'd
ganged up
once
on him,
served
huh?
under him, emerged with weapons. They'd been planning this for months, with quiet support from the CIA, who wanted Trujillo gone. The 69-year-old
Wow.
dictator's car was riddled with bullets. Some accounts say Trujillo tried to fight back, pulling out his own pistol and firing at his attackers before being
Of
shot
course.
multiple times. Within minutes, El Jefe, the chief, was dead on the side of the road, his body torn apart.
Of course, the one story has to be him getting out of the car and like, no, I'm gonna take you all. Yeah, okay.
By gunfire. The conspirators loaded his corpse into one of their cars and drove away, unsure what to do next. Trujillo's body ended up stored in the trunk of a car for hours while the assassins debated their next move. Eventually, his remains were recovered by loyalist forces. What followed was chaos. Some conspirators were caught and executed, others fled, and the country descended into political turmoil. For a ruler so brutal, Trujillo's end was fittingly the same. Nicolae Ceaușescu. Nicolae and Elena
Nicolae Ceaușescu. Never heard of him. Let's find out who this person is.
Ceaușescu spent Christmas Day 1989 facing a firing squad, and the whole thing was captured on video. After ruling Romania with an iron fist for over 2 decades, the Ceaușescus watched their power evaporate during the country's anti-communist revolution. On December
That's
22nd,
why.
they attempted to flee Bucharest by helicopter as protests overwhelmed the capital. They were captured within hours. 3 days later, on Christmas Day, they stood trial in a small room at a military base in Targovit.
Dang. On Christmas Day, they were like, okay, this is going to be your Christmas present.
The trial was a rushed affair, lasting barely an hour, with charges of genocide and embezzlement, among others. The elderly couple appeared confused and defiant, with Elena repeatedly protesting that the proceedings were illegal. The verdict was never in doubt. Guilty, death sentence. Minutes after the trial concluded, Nicolae and Elena were led outside to a courtyard wall, soldiers lined up. The couple was given no chance to say goodbye
Really?
or make final statements beyond their protests during the trial. The firing squad opened fire, and both Ceaușescu dropped dead almost instantly, their bodies riddled.
Within 2 hours, these dudes are done. Trial, guilty, death sentence, see you later. Oh, that's insane.
With over 100 bullets. The execution was
100
filmed,
bullets.
and that evening, Romanian television broadcast the news, along with footage
they-
proving they were dead. The footage spread internationally, shocking
wow.
viewers who
Look at
watched
that
a
picture.
longtime communist leader go from power to execution in just 3 days. Pol Pot, the architect of Cambodia's genocide that killed up to 2 million people, died quietly in a jungle hut in 1998. After the Khmer
genocide,
Rouge
2
regime
million
fell in
people.
1979, Pol Pot fled into the jungle near the Thai border, where he lived as a fugitive for nearly 2 decades. By 1998, he was 73 years old, under house arrest by a splinter faction of his own former movement. On April 15, 1998, Pol Pot died.
They always end up getting caught by their own peoples, man. Once their people start saying, yeah, let's just get rid of this guy, man. Let's get rid of this person. It's over for them. It's over for you.
In his sleep, reportedly from
Nobody
heart
wants to be
failure.
ruled
The
like that.
timing was suspicious. Just days earlier, remaining Khmer Rouge leaders had agreed to hand him over for an international war crimes trial. Instead, he escaped justice by dying in a bamboo hut. The Khmer Rouge, knowing how skeptical the world would be, did something macabre. They displayed Pol Pot's corpse to journalists, inviting them to photograph the body to prove he was really dead. Images of his lifeless
That's pretty
body
smart.
appeared in newspapers globally. There would be no trial, no accountability, no chance for
course
victims
not.
to face him in court. The butcher of Cambodia had literally died in his sleep and avoided answering for millions of deaths. His body
Of
was
course.
cremated on a makeshift pyre of tires and trash, a pathetic end for a man who'd
This guy orchestrated genocide. And he said, you know what we're going to do with your body? Throw you on some tires and junk and burn you up.
orchestrated industrial-scale murder. Saddam Hussein. Saddam
Uh-oh.
Hussein's
Saddam Hussein. There he is. We were waiting for this guy.
execution on December 30th, 2006, was supposed to be a solemn, controlled event. It wasn't. After the US-led invasion of Iraq and a lengthy trial for crimes against humanity, Saddam was sentenced to death by hanging. At dawn on that December morning, the 69-year-old former dictator
Well,
was
at
led
least that's
into
our
an
December,
execution
huh?
chamber at an Iraqi military base in Baghdad. Official protocol was supposed to keep things dignified, but someone in the room had a cell phone. As Saddam stood on the gallows with a noose around his neck, guards began
course
taunting
somebody
him,
had a phone.
shouting sectarian insults. Saddam responded with defiance, reciting prayers until the trapdoor opened, and he dropped. The whole thing was captured on a grainy cell phone video that leaked online almost immediately. Saddam, dressed in a black coat,
wow.
remained composed even as the insults flew. When the floor gave way beneath him, it was over quickly. His body was later returned to his family and buried in his hometown of Tikrit. The execution sparked massive
At least he got to-
controversy.
at least he
Some
got to
viewed it
bury
as
him. justice
justice served. Others condemned the disrespectful treatment of a man facing death, regardless of his crimes. Muammar
Yeah, okay.
Gaddafi. Muammar Gaddafi.
That's crazy. But at least he was able to get buried by his family, man. Something good, I guess.
Ruled Libya for 42 years with a bizarre mix of brutality and eccentricity. On October 20th, 2011, he died begging for mercy in a drainage pipe, and the whole thing was filmed on cell phones. During Libya's civil
Wow.
war, Gaddafi fled Tripoli as rebel forces closed in. He made it to his hometown of Sirte, where he held out for weeks before NATO airstrikes destroyed his convoy. Gaddafi escaped the wreckage and hid in a concrete drainage pipe with a few remaining bodyguards. When rebels found him, they dragged the
gotcha.
69-year-old dictator out into the open. Multiple cell phone videos captured what happened next.
Multiple
A
cell
bloody,
phone videos.
disoriented Gaddafi, his face swollen and his clothes torn, being manhandled by jubilant fighters. In one video, He's heard
Man.
pleading, asking what he did wrong. Rebels shouted
What
victoriously.
he did
Some struck
victor-
him,
wrong.
and chaos reigned. What exactly happened in those final minutes remains disputed, but Gaddafi was shot, reportedly in the head, and died
Wow.
shortly after his capture.
He was executed, huh? That is... Wow.
His body was later displayed in Misrata, where locals lined up to see the corpse of their former dictator lying in a commercial freezer. The phrase "caught like a rat in a drain" became headlines. His body was eventually
like a
buried
rat
in an
in a
unmarked grave in the desert, location undisclosed. Augusto Pinochet
Augusto
ruled Chile for
Pinochet.
17 years after seizing power in a bloody 1973 coup that overthrew the democratically elected government of Salvador Allende. During his dictatorship, thousands of Chileans were tortured, killed, or disappeared. But unlike many dictators,
Wow.
Pinochet didn't die violently or in exile. He died in a hospital bed, old and comfortable, never fully answering for his crime.
Some of these people always just die of like a heart attack, or he's dying comfortably. He just died of natural causes, huh?
By 2006, the 91-year-old former dictator had been battling health problems for years. He'd suffered multiple heart attacks and strokes, and his body was finally giving out.
always gotta
On
be a
December
heart attack or
3rd,
stroke, huh?
2006,
Another
Pinochet
December.
suffered a massive heart attack and was rushed to Santiago's military hospital. Doctors performed emergency surgery, but complications set in quickly. Over the next week, his
over.
condition deteriorated. He suffered additional heart attacks and developed pulmonary edema, his lungs
once
filling
you
with
get those heart
fluid.
attacks, it's
On
over.
December 10th, 2006, exactly 1 week after his initial heart attack, and on International Human Rights Day, Augusto Pinochet died
What are the
surrounded
odds
by
of that?
family members. He was 91 years old. When news of
What are
his
the
death
odds of
reached the
that?
streets of Santiago, the reaction was split. Some Chileans celebrated, gathering in the streets to cheer and wave flags, relieved that the dictator was finally gone. Others mourned, viewing him as the man who'd saved Chile from communism and brought economic stability. Here's what made Pinochet's death particularly frustrating for those seeking justice. He'd spent his final years fighting extradition and prosecution. He'd been arrested in London in 1998 on Spanish warrants for human rights violations, but was eventually released on medical grounds and returned to Chile. Back home,
course.
he faced multiple indictments for human rights abuses, tax evasion, and embezzlement, but his lawyers repeatedly argued he was too sick and senile to stand trial. The cases dragged on for years, and Pinochet
Of
never
course.
spent a day in prison for the atrocities committed under his rule. His funeral was a private military
He was just
affair,
chilling.
and he was cremated shortly after. Pinochet's ashes were divided among family members, with some reportedly scattered in the ocean. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for similar ones, and feel
Yo, if you definitely liked this video, definitely hit that subscribe, hit them follows. Let me know in the comments which one of these dictators had it coming for them. Definitely drop those comments, man. We'll catch you on the next reaction. Peace.